week ago, Special Ed was on the podcast. What podcast was that? What podcast was he on? I can't remember. But he said that NWA was basically they basically called social ruin to black people in the black community with what their music did in terms of promoting gangster rap. Slankster Hughes, what do you think about that? What do you think about Special Ed's comments?
Well, it's interesting because there's a large portion of that particular mind frame that it was very prevalent in the time that NWA came out among certain black people, older black people at the time, so-called self-proclaimed, if you will, black leaders, black thought leaders who, your Dionne Warwick types and such, who was like, this gangster rap is destroying black youth and black America. And, let's get bulldozers and run over these CDs that we still had to purchase. And so
Tucker.
Yeah, Dolores
right.
Tucker.
And so there's something about that perspective that is not completely off in terms of that. What we know is that the industry, specifically hip hop in the mainstream, was co-opted by the CIA, and they planted agents to take over in positions in record companies to specifically target the youth of America with a certain message and a certain lower vibration. And so they inundated the market with one kind of hip hop, with the glorified gangster and violence and things of that nature. Now, while that's true, it doesn't necessarily, you can't put NWA in a whole box completely as if this was their mission, or, everything that happened on those NWA albums was all one-sided, as if it didn't produce quality hip hop, as if they weren't expressing quality messages, being the CNN of the hood, if you will. Especially that first album where they were really touching on a lot of really serious social political issues. They were just doing it from their Compton perspective, like what Public Enemy did. I know we're going to get deeper into that comparison. Public Enemy did from their perspective was very similar to what NWA was doing. It was just from a certain perspective. Now, if you want to get into, the next NWA album, how some of it became a little more inundated with the gangster romanticism and all of that, there's something to be said about that, but I don't think it's cool to paint it all in just one broad brushstroke of, NWA destroyed the minds of the black youth necessarily. I think with everything there comes two sides of the conversation.
Joshua Swan, what are your thoughts on this? Have you heard Special Ed's indictment of
I heard a little bit of it. I heard a little bit of it, and all I gotta say is that you really can't blame one group for. He said it destroying the minds of black kids and stuff. I totally disagree. It's like one album or group, you just can't blame it on one group. It has to. You got to think about where the perspective of where they're coming from, of talking about their art, of their storytelling. Come on, that's like saying the Ghetto Boys were destroying hip hop, or Public Enemy destroying I
think what he was saying though is that the industry used that particular group and their messages, and because it's almost like a copycat, like they say the NBA is a copycat league. A team wins with a particular style and other teams copy them. Other groups began to push forward with these messages. It began to push positivity and conscious music to the back.
Selling records.
Prince
you got a lot of CB4s came up after.
Yeah, CB4. You see that a lot of that now.
Prince Mac, what do you think about this? I mean, as a younger MC and artist, maybe this reaches back into the past, but do you think that this has had an effect? If you look back as a historian that you so-called yourself?
Black communities, I'm sure if you're weak-minded, not to push any wrong agenda or anything like that, but what I'm saying is in middle school, I listened to NWA. I listened to quite a bit of the hits, as a matter of fact. And me personally, I've turned out just fine. Heck, I rap now, and I don't touch on gangster topics, and I'm not doing anything like that. It can sometimes come down to a nature versus nurture thing. And to be quite honest, it's all about the consumer and what the consumer likes. Sometimes what the media will push, what the consumer will like, but it often also comes down to nature versus nurture and how you were raised. And me personally, I never had that problem. I listened to NWA. It turned out just fine.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, that is
nature versus nurture. But at the same time, a lot of children in our community, they come from broken homes and they don't have parents there to separate them or separate reality from fiction. Because I grew up with a lot of people that they wanted to be Nino Brown. They wanted to be O Doug from Minister Society. They didn't have parents to tell them. My mother was telling me, hey, look, you're Trey. Find yourself in the film that you're watching. You're not Doughboy, or you're not the Bishop from Juice. You're someone that's more positive.
You're Quincy.
I'm Quincy. There you go. I mean, my people here. I watched RoboCop in 1987, which was the greatest cursing exhibition of all time. But I knew not to say that shit in real life around my parents or nothing like that. But I did watch the show. I knew not to go out killing people like you're a move creep. However, there are a lot of kids that don't have that. And the minds are malleable, and music is definitely a very powerful form of influence in general in our community. It could be used for that type of programming. So, I mean, in some ways, the CIA probably won. But as far as NWA, I feel like they were like hood reporters. They were talking about things that were going on in Compton at the time that no one wanted to address, at least on the first album, Straight Outta Compton, which was very revolutionary, very impactful. By the time you get to the record in 1991, oh man, you could almost jerk off to that album. It was ridiculous. It was X-rated, bro. It was X-rated. She swallowed it. Don't matter, just don't bite. The world's biggest. It was ridiculous. For those of you who have heard.
Oh yeah, talking about Strawberry, the neighborhood. Oh.
It was once Ice Cube separated from that group, the writing kind of went down a little bit.